All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. We are here. We are live. It is Tuesday, March 24th, 2026. Appreciate everybody out there making us a part of your day. Lots of stuff that we need to discuss. The news of the day yesterday, after we signed off on the show, Jerrod Calhoun going to be the next head coach at the University of Cincinnati. He's going to be coaching up the men's basketball team. Wes Miller is out. Jerrod Calhoun is in. By the way, we talked about yesterday, Wes Miller did get the job at Charlotte, so he still gets to keep a head job, but obviously a bit of a demotion. He leaves Cincinnati, he goes to Charlotte, and a promotion as mid-major. Jerrod Calhoun, he leaves Utah State. Now he's in the Big 12. Now he's back at his alma mater, the University of Cincinnati, and it kind of felt like ever since the job officially opened up, when Wes Miller was shown the exit, everybody in the fan base, everybody that reported on the Bearcats, Keegan Nickerson, friend of the show, everybody said, you know, it kind of feels like the writing is on the wall for Jerrod Calhoun to be the next coach at UC. That was kind of a one-track mindset for the Bearcats athletic department. Certainly John Cunningham making those decisions. It kind of felt like they were zeroed in on Jerrod Calhoun and really weren't entertaining many other people out there. Ultimately, they get their guy. They get Jerrod Calhoun. He's going to be the next head coach at UC. And I think if you're a UC fan, you got to be all types of fired up about this addition, as he has won everywhere he has been, and going to spend some time on today's show talking about Jerrod Calhoun, next head coach at UC. Also, Kelsey Conway came out from the Inquirer. She said the Bengals intend to give DJ Turner and Dax Hill extensions this offseason. Obviously, not much has gone on as far as extensions for Cincinnati as it relates to those two guys. OBJ, of course, that kind of came out of nowhere, and we're like, what? OBJ getting an extension? He ended up getting one. Haven't really heard much buzz. Kelsey's saying that they haven't really been in contact yet with those two players, but that is what they want to do. They do want to give them an extension before week 1 of the regular season. We'll see if those talks ultimately heat up once we get to training camp in a couple of months. We'll talk about that. Also, Field Yates has his latest mock draft, 2 rounds for ESPN.com. Break down really quickly who he's got Cincinnati taking at 10, who he's got Cincinnati taking at 41 overall there as well. And I think I've talked about this a bunch on the show, that nightmare situation, right? When all the defensive players are going off the board in the top 10. Well, in Field Yates' top 10, he does not have either one of those tackles, the kid from Utah, Fano, and the kid from Miami, Maui Noah, going in the top 10, which obviously allows more defensive players to go and ultimately hurts Cincinnati at that 10 overall spot. We'll talk about that. Also, it's pro day season. Delane tested really well, the corner from LSU. Jerry Montgomery, defensive line coach for the Bengals. He was down in South Florida getting a close eye on Ruben Bain. There's a great picture on the internet of him just kind of front row, hands on his hips, just locked in as Ruben Bain's doing some drills. Could he potentially be available at number 10 overall? Zach Taylor taking in UC's pro day yesterday. Jake Golday, one of UC's top prospects, projects in about the second round, plays that linebacker position. Could that potentially be a target for Cincinnati at number 41 overall? We'll talk about that. Also, C. Trent Rosecrans covers the Cincinnati Reds for The Athletic. He put together his 3 bold predictions for this season as it relates to the Cincinnati Reds opening day 2 days from now. How about that? Baseball back in the Queen City on Thursday just after 4 o'clock Eastern start time. We'll have you covered all day long. We'll have my show in the morning. We'll see if we can't get Reed Mouse on the show. I know he's here. He's in the comment section. Maybe we can talk to Reed, the most trusted voice on the Cincinnati Reds. And then that will lead into Nick Kirby, Trace Fowler, potentially Craig Sandlin, Mike Hart, and others, as we've got you covered all day long here. Cincinnati Reds opening day on Thursday. Do not want to miss out on that. But we'll talk about C. Trent's bold predictions for Cincinnati, and then on tomorrow's show, we'll do mine as we get geared up here for the 2026 MLB season. Quarterback talk. Fernando Mendoza, the consensus number 1 overall pick. Dan Orlovsky came out, ESPN, yesterday and said, you know what, Ty Simpson's quarterback 1 in this class. I've been banging the table ever since Ty Simpson took that first snap in week 1 in a game against Florida State where Alabama got absolutely boat raced. And I said, you know what, Bama's got a quarterback here in Ty Simpson. People laughed at me. Well, guess what? He's heating up a little bit here, and it's always dangerous when you got one of these prospects that just heat up and they're not playing any football, right? Happened with Zach Wilson, where it's like, yeah, this kid from BYU is pretty good. Oh, he's going number 2 overall. The New York Jets. What in the world happened? Don't think we're going to see that kind of rise here for Ty Simpson, but Dan Orlovsky, others point out, hey, This guy can play. This guy's an NFL-type quarterback. Got some thoughts on Ty Simpson on today's show. Sweet 16. Everyone's complaining. No Cinderellas. NIL's ruining the sport. Take a look at the slate on Thursday and Friday. And if you're a college hoops fan, you got absolutely nothing to complain about. These games are absolutely awesome, specifically the Friday games. Lots of perennial powers, lots of superstars, lots of star coaches as well. Going to be cinema. Going to be must-see TV Thursday and Friday. Some thoughts on the Sweet 16 to wrap out today's show. Also, a couple of sports headlines. We'll probably spend more time talking about this later in the week. Tigers back. His team, Team Jupiter, they're going to be back in the for the TGL finals, and he's going to be playing. Obviously, he hasn't played in over a year. JSM, we talked about his big-time deal for Seattle. How is that going to affect Puka Nacua, right? Are the Rams going to back up the Brinks truck for a guy in Puka Nacua, who, of course, I don't want to say he had off-the-field issues. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but he certainly made some headlines off the field. And when you back up the Brinks truck for a player, that's the last thing you want. Are the Los Angeles Rams potentially going to let this thing get to week one and not have a new contract for Puka Nacua? Or are they going to break the bank? Or are they going to give him more money than Seattle just gave JSN? Something that we can talk as the week progresses. Also, Travis Kelce is officially back. I saw 3 years to the contract. I don't think necessarily that means for sure he's going to be playing for 3 more years, but I think it does mean that he ain't ever suiting up for another team, not named the Kansas City Chiefs. But lots of going on in the world of sports. Appreciate everybody joining us here on the show. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. On our way to 23,000 subscribers. Like the stream if you're watching live. If you catch a YouTube clip later on in the afternoon, do us a favor, like that as well. We had some Chatterbox Reds stuff going out at all times. Craig Sandlin had a great interview. I think that went out either last night or this morning, one or the two. Regardless, check it out. Hit the heart icon. Like the show for us, certainly as well. Follow us on social media as we really get geared up here for opening day in a couple of days. Lots of reason to be excited about that. Appreciate everybody being here. Let's dive in. Cincinnati Bearcats, they hire Jerrod Calhoun as the next head coach of their men's basketball team. This guy's won everywhere he has been. This guy won at the D2 level at Fairmont State. This guy won at Youngstown State over the course of his 7 seasons there. Didn't have a losing season the last 5 years of that run at Youngstown State. Past 2 years has been at Utah State and has been absolutely killing it. Made the tournament both years. Picked up a tournament win against Villanova this year before ultimately bowing out to Arizona in the round of 32, but really a gutsy performance in that game. I think, and ESPN put out their top 16 rankings of the teams left in the Sweet 16. Most people have Arizona as the best team in this tournament, and they gave them all they could handle, right? It was a single-point margin, single-digit margin, I should say, and I thought his team really competed throughout the course of the game. And I think you're going to see a real identity switch from the men's basketball team, right? People pick apart Wes Miller, and they're going to continue to do that, but his team's defended. Right, his team's played some defense on that side of the floor. It was the scoring that became an issue, particularly scoring late in ball games. Going to get a bit of an inverse of that with Calhoun coming in, which I think, by the way, is a good thing. Calhoun's offenses are elite. His defenses can be a little bit lackluster, and we'll talk about that more as we progress through this segment. But we do want to give a shout-out to our friends at Sharefax Credit Union. The Stone Shield Show is brought to you by Sharefax Credit Union. Sharefax is rooted in Cincinnati with 9 branches across the city. Sharefax is a not-for-profit financial institution owned by its members that returns earnings to them through lower fees and better rates, in addition to traditional banking options. They have an auto promo going on right now, offering 1.5% off your qualified rate when you refinance your vehicle with them. Your first payment isn't due for 90 days. Loan subject to membership and credit approval. Restrictions apply. Visit the website for terms and conditions. Go to sharefax.org to apply online or call 513-753-2440. Again, sharefax.org to apply, become a member, or call 513-753-2440. Appreciate our friends at Sharefax Credit Union being on board here at the Stone Shield Show and here at Chatterbox Sports, certainly there as well. It's been reported that Cincinnati expects to get its NIL pool north of $8 million for the upcoming season. All right, good, right? Get that number up. It was up with Wes Miller, right? There was a lot of money, a lot of resources being allocated toward those rosters. Well, now you got a better coach coming in, a guy that has shown you, hey, I can win. I can win at a high level. Can I win at the high major level? that remains to be seen in a conference like the Big 12, but there's a lot of optimism surrounding Jerrod Calhoun. And I mentioned this when we first came on the show. It kind of felt like it was a one-track mindset for the athletic department at the University of Cincinnati, and specifically their AD, John Cunningham, because, Jerrod Calhoun was a sought-after guy. Right. I'm sure Arizona State, who, by the way, just hired the St. Mary's coach, I'm sure there was some interest there. Obviously, the tiebreaker is, hey, Jerrod Calhoun happened to go to this university. He's an alumni of the University of Cincinnati, and, of course, had ties to the staff. But sometimes, regardless of the sport, when you have these coaching searches, sometimes teams, they're bringing everybody in. Like, hey, we're interested in everybody. We're interviewing everybody. And then some other teams say, you know what, we've got a few candidates that we're going to talk to and go from there. But we really have a guy in mind. And there's another side of that, too, where it's like, this is our guy. We are doing everything in our power to get this particular individual. And I think that was the situation here for the University of Cincinnati, right? We had talked about some other guys. We did our Wes Miller replacement segment here on the show, talking about Shirts, the guy from St. Louis, threw out Travis Steele out there. That ruffled some feathers, certainly from some folks in Clifton. We talked about the USF guy, who certainly just got a new job as well. Threw out a couple other names, but, I don't have, close ties to the university. I'm not behind the doors here, behind closed doors, figuring out exactly what this process looked like, but just talking with Keegan Nicholson. All right, hearing all the reporters, Scott Springer, Cincinnati.com, all the national college basketball people as well, reading, talking to some people behind the scenes, kind of felt like it was Jerrod Calhoun or bust, and they were doing everything in their power to bring in Jerrod Calhoun as their next head coach here at the University of Cincinnati. And we've seen in previous years, I think some of these coaches have done a nice job, whereas it feels like in football, you get bowl season, which is really weird, and nobody really cares about the bowls beyond, of course, the college football playoff, right? Stuff gets leaked, right? Remember the Lincoln Riley stuff a couple of years ago where it's like, he was getting badgered about going to LSU, and then he got, really short with some of the reporters, and it's like, guys, I'm not going to LSU, which he was right, but he left anyway. He just went to USC. Everybody thought he was going to LSU, right? But some of these college coaches have done a nice job of, hey, telling these universities, like, yeah, I want to come, I'm coming, but I'm going to wait until, we wrap up with our season, right? When we get through March Madness and ultimately our season ends, whenever that comes. We've seen this multiple times over the course of the past few years. We've seen it this year as well. And credit to Jerrod Calhoun. I was watching him closely when he was addressing the media, going through the tournament the past couple of days, and said all the right things, showed love to his team. But at the same time, he had told UC, like, hey, when we're done with this thing, I'll be coming to Clifton, right? And I think everybody should be really, really excited, anybody that supports the Cincinnati men's basketball program, because what I just talked about earlier here in this segment was that, it was very much a defensive identity for Cincinnati. And they played good defense throughout Wes Miller's tenure. They really did. But at the end of the day, it was the offense that held them back. It was the lack of creativity. It was the lack of shot making. It was the lack of a plan. How many times do we sit here on this show and say, yeah, you see they're kind of just all standing behind the three-point line and they're kind of passing the ball a little bit, and then they look up at the shot clock and there's 3 or 4 seconds left and they got to chuck up a bad shot. How many times did that happen? Right? How many times did they have a lead that got blown? The staff of Huggins when he was a student here at the University of Cincinnati, right? A student assistant on that Huggins staff. And then he went to West Virginia with Huggins. West Virginia and Huggins obviously had a great stretch. I think they went to the Final Four in 2010, and I believe Jerrod Calhoun was a part of that staff throughout that process certainly as well. So there's a lot of winning that has taken place when Jerrod Calhoun is the head coach of the men's basketball program. There's a lot of winning that takes place when he's been an assistant coach with the men's basketball program. And he's 44 years of age. I think you look at some pictures and you think he might be in his 50s. He's not. He's 44 years of age, so a little bit more seasoned, of course, than Wes Miller, but still has a little bit of youthful exuberance, right, to get behind some of the guys. And, I think from an alumni perspective, you've heard Terry Nelson and others come out and voice how excited they are about having a guy like Jerrod Calhoun come in. We talked about on the show yesterday how there is kind of an infatuation and just a love for Bob Huggins, and rightfully so, right? And just kind of a craving from the fan base and from the alumni base and former players to kind of get back to that brand of basketball, because Mick Cronin had a heck of a run here. But was he getting to the second weekend in the NCAA tournament? No, he was not. And obviously with Brennan coming in after that, that was a disaster. And Wes Miller, I wouldn't call his tenure a disaster, but it certainly didn't go according to plan. And when you have 5 years as the head coach at a program like UC and you fail to make the tournament a single time, pretty significant failure, right? So just the attachment that this university and this fan base and this alumni base has to Bob Huggins, this is a Huggins guy. Right, this is a guy that was on his staff, that worked closely with him, was a student assistant when he was at Cincinnati, assistant coach when he was at West Virginia. And I think, getting a guy like that back in that has a little bit of fire, that has a little bit of swag, that'll get after his players, that knows how to play tough basketball, but also play very creative basketball offensively, I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about this hire of Jerrod Calhoun coming in. And now all of a sudden you can hang in there when you're going up against the team just across the way in Xavier and a head coach like Richard Pitino. Well, guess what? Guess who got dominated by Jerrod Calhoun when he was at New Mexico? Richard Pitino, right? So there's a bit of a relationship there and a rivalry there from their days in that particular conference, right? And just going into the crosstown shootout each and every year, it just felt like UC was outmanned, whether it be Sean Miller or now with Richard Pitino. Now you're in a spot where it's like, you know what, we've got a coach that can hang in there, and we might have a coach that is actually the better coach, certainly in this matchup as well. And you just look around the state of Ohio, bringing in a guy like Jerrod Calhoun. Is he better than Diebler up in Columbus? You betcha. You betcha, right? Don't want to bring, the Redhawks into this conversation too much there, but you feel like he can match up well against a guy like Travis Steele and Mac as well. So all of a sudden, one hire, you're looked at one of the worst teams in the state and certainly a bottom feeder in the Big 12. Now all of a sudden you bring in a guy in Jerrod Calhoun. It's like, you know what? All of a sudden in the state of Ohio, we got one of the best coaches. We can hang in there. And all of a sudden you look at the Big 12 conference and say, we have a top-tier coach here as well. Now is the winning going to translate from mid-major, school like Utah State, to obviously a high major in a school like University of Cincinnati at the Big 12 level? That, of course, remains to be seen. But my biggest takeaway, if you're asking me, great hire by UC. Honestly, home run. Hit it out of the park. That was as good as they could have done bringing in Jerrod Calhoun. And it's just a cherry on top that he has the connections to the university and has the connection, of course, to the Cincinnati men's basketball program. Couple of questions now. What's the roster look like? Utah State had some good players, had a lot of seniors, upperclassmen on that team, guys that are out of eligibility. Who's going to be coming over from Utah State to Clifton? There will be somebody. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. Mason Foslev, one of their guards, he's a starter for them. Can score the ball, can defend a little bit certainly as well. He has an additional year of eligibility. That's the name that comes immediately to the top of mind as far as a guy that potentially is going to transfer in from Utah State. Obviously, you've got a whole lot of roster reconstruction that you got to go through here if you're Jerrod Calhoun. And if you get here to Clifton, who are you trying to hang on to? My first call, if I'm Jerrod Calhoun, is I'm getting Mustafa Cham on the phone. Right? I'm saying, hey, we're coming in. We want you to stay. We really like what you did this year. We think you can be even better over the course of the rest of your college career, and we want it to be here at UC, and we want to help you be one of those guys that kind of bridge the gap from the Wes Miller era to, of course, the new era of Jerrod Calhoun. That's what I would be doing if I was Coach Calhoun. Get Mustafa Cham on the phone. Do whatever you can to keep him. Because one thing you need in the Big 12 is size. And I sat here and moaned a little bit about some of the lack of toughness or lack of physicality from Mustafa Cham, but I still believe in the ceiling of the player. I still believe in the potential of the player, and I still really like what I saw from the player the final few weeks of the season. I'm doing whatever I can to sure up that I got that 5, that I got that center, that I got that big man that can be a guy that helps me transition into this new age of this program. Right? I think Mustafa Cham is the guy I'm calling and trying to get to stay. Shanabayev, it feels like it's a foregone conclusion that he's gone. Right? There was a clip that kind of went viral on social media about him at Home Depot buying the moving boxes, right? That whole thing is just unfortunate, right? Because he's top recruit since Lance Stevenson. The expectations are so sky high. Came in and year one obviously fell incredibly short of those expectations. Struggled to even get playing time throughout the stretch of the season, but ultimately was not 100% for much of the season either. And that is something that is worth mentioning certainly with him. But just him being back here, it kind of feels like he's going to be somewhere else and getting ready for year 2 at the college basketball level. I would be shocked if Shanabayev was back. Baba Miller is out of eligibility. You know, I don't even pretend to sit here and know about what guys can do, because all these guys that are out of eligibility that play really well as a senior, not to say that Baba Miller had a great year, but just a solid year, right? And they're making so much money playing college sports, they like to try to sue somebody and put themselves in a position where they can get another year of eligibility, right? That's just what happens now. I can't sit here and pretend what I know is going to happen, right? If one of these guys is going to be rewarded a year or not. I mean, we're in 2026 and we got people still talking about the COVID year, right? I mean, that was back in 2020. Are we going to be sitting here in 2040 like, well, this guy can play, he's got the COVID year? I don't know. I don't pretend to understand any of that stuff when it comes to eligibility of some of these student athletes. But it seems like Baba Miller is done playing college basketball, and you move on. And I would think JC would probably be done certainly as well. He was a senior, right? Came in from Baylor. Maybe he has some eligibility. I'm not 100% sure, but the upperclassmen probably are gone. Chom's the guy I'm calling, and then Keyshawn Tillery. Keyshawn Tillery was kind of put out on the floor early in the season, got some tick, and it didn't go well early in the season. He looked like a freshman. He looked like he was a bit overwhelmed out there, and I made the joke that, you know, Wes was kind of just putting him out there to make sure he didn't transfer, right? Make sure he was a guy that stuck around for the future. I would be interested in bringing him back. I thought he really flashed at the end of the year. I thought there was a ton of growth from Keyshawn Tillery. If I had to pick one guy that improved the most from the start of the year to the end of the year, I think it's pretty obviously him. He's got a lot of potential, highly rated recruits, 3 years left of eligibility, right? That's also a guy that I'm calling saying, hey, you mind sticking around here? You want to be a part of the future? You like it here in Clifton? You like it here in Cincinnati? Would love to coach you. Right, that's a guy that I'm certainly calling as well. Jizzle, it kind of feels like to me, I don't know this for a fact, but something tells me he's going to Charlotte, right? I kind of, if I had to bet on that, I would say Jizzle is going to Charlotte with Wes, and I can guarantee you Wes is doing everything in his power to get him to go to Charlotte. I don't know if there will be much of a market beyond that for Jizzle. I'm not quite sure, but Day obviously out of eligibility there as well. So those are the two guys that I'm calling. Chom is priority number one for me, and then, of course, Keyshawn Tillery. I'm certainly interested in having him stick around if I'm Jerrod Calhoun coming in. But a new age of Cincinnati basketball, lots of reason to be excited. Now you feel like you can hang in there in the state. Now you feel like you can hang in there in the Big 12 Conference. Now you feel good about your offense, kind of an identity switch, right? Defense to offense. Don't think that's the end of the world. Look at the Bengals across town. Why do we like them so much? Because they score a lot of points and they're fun to watch, right? Why do we love Miami so much? Because they scored a lot of points and they were fun to watch. I think a bit of an identity shift in Clifton would be a good thing for this program. So not an alum, but obviously live here, support the program. If you're an alum, I think you should be absolutely fired up about it, and brighter days ahead for the UC basketball program. Absolutely no doubt about it. They get their guy, Jerrod Calhoun. All right, some extension talk here on the show. Kelsey Conway of the Inquirer, she came out and said that the Bengals are interested in extensions with both Dax Hill and DJ Turner, and that is something that they are going to pursue here this offseason. My takeaway with that is, okay, good. Go ahead and do it. See if you can get it done. Also, Field Yates, ESPN.com. He put out a second mock draft after the wave of free agency. We did ours, by the way. Went out last week. Check that out if you haven't done so already. But he's got a pick at number 10, and he has got a pick for Cincinnati at 41. We will break that down in a moment. But first, got to give a shout-out to our friends over at QC Kinetix. If knee pain or shoulder pain is slowing you down, slowing down your performance, whether it be on the golf course, the pickleball court, or even in the gym, talk to the care team at QC Kinetix Cincinnati about regenerative medicine options. Learn more at qckinetix.com or call 513-655-3356. The team over there is absolutely incredible. They have a location in Liberty Township right across Lakota East High School. The folks at QC Kinetix bring a different approach with regenerative medicine, and you don't have to be an athlete. If you're just a weekend warrior here in Cincinnati dealing with back pain or trying to get ready for golf season, they can help. Check out the team at QC Kinetix and see what they're all about. Again, visit qckinetix.com or call 513-655-3356. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at 78 Cigars. Cincinnati legend Anthony Munoz has a new venture, and we're fired up to partner with it here at the Stone Shield Show. Introducing 78 Cigars, a premium cigar line from the Hall of Famer himself. If you love great cigars in Cincinnati football history, this is the perfect combination. You can grab 78 Cigars right now at both Montgomery in locations, the original and Montgomery, and of course the Boathouse downtown, or over at Creekside Cigar Company. Additionally, you can check them out online. Just head over to anthonymunoz.com and click on the 78 Cigars page to learn more and order today. That's 78 Cigars from the greatest offensive lineman to ever do it, Anthony Munoz. All right, here's a report exactly from Kelsey Conway. Quote, the Bengals haven't started negotiations with cornerbacks DJ Turner and Dax Hill yet, but the franchise has made it clear that both players are in their plans for the future. My whole original takeaway when we first got into the offseason was, let's give Dax that extension right here, right now. Right, because they picked up the fifth-year option on Dax Hill. And something we've talked about here at the show, when you pick up the fifth-year option, that cap hit is not massaged over the course of multiple years. That is boom, right here, right now. It's a pretty significant cap hit. That's coming, obviously, for Dax Hill. And my takeaway was, well, let's get rid of essentially that cap hit and make it less significant. Let's give him that extension. Then we can break up the cap hit over multiple years. That allows you to be more aggressive in free agency this go around and give you some more money to spend. Cincinnati, of course, did not opt to do that. And, you know, I would say it's a mistake, but is the sky falling? Is it the worst thing in the world? No. But we talked about how it kind of made more sense for Dax to get done before DJ. I don't know if necessarily that's the case, because who's the free agent out there that you're going to give a bunch of money? There aren't really those guys that are still available. Are there still mid-tier, lower-tier guys? Yes, absolutely. But your stars are gone, right? Your Jalen Phillips of the world are gone. Your Odafe Oweis of the world are gone, right? So there's nobody you can really gear up and give a fat paycheck that is still an available free agent. But I'm of the mind that you should extend both of these guys, right? You got to be careful in this league about just, let's extend everybody. He's a good player. Extend him. Give him a bunch of money. You're seeing it right now in Seattle, right? Seattle just won the Super Bowl. That defense was unreal. They just let the Super Bowl MVP walk, and they let Kobe Bryant walk, who was a great player for them over the course of his rookie contract as well. Why? Well, they had to back up the Brinks truck yesterday for JSN, right? So, you know, a lot of people were talking about Seattle. It's like, what are they doing? John Schneider, he's won a Super Bowl, and now he's just celebrating the Super Bowl. He's not doing anything in free agency. You can't pay everybody, right? You can do more than the Bengals do, but you also can't pay everybody. But I do think it would be a good idea to pay those guys. You're not allocating any money besides Boye Mafe now along on your defense, right? Those guys, did you hit them out of the park? Did they produce as early as you would want? No. But safe to say they played really good football. They played winning football. And you always want to be a draft and develop franchise, right? You're going to have to add in the margins in free agency. But when you have players that you draft that perform well, that you can sit there and evaluate and say, this guy can be a starter on our team that wins a championship. I feel that way about DJ and Dax. Again, they're not perfect players. And you still need to see more, right, from those guys, specifically DJ Turner, where you picked him in the second round from Michigan. There were some ups and downs. Remember, Dax beat him out when he was switching from safety, and it was like, yeah, he's switching positions. No way he's going to beat him out. And then he beat him out within like a week, like no problem at all, just busted him. And then DJ was a bench guy, reserve guy. Then he got back in the lineup, and then he was balling out, and then he fractured his clavicle, and it's like, what are we going to do? And then he obviously had an incredible year last year. So, it's tough in the NFL because when you're paying a guy a contract, their agent is trying to break some type of record. And, again, DJ had a great year last year. He better not be breaking any records at that cornerback spot. So I don't anticipate the Bengals are going to do that. My gut tells me that they're going to negotiate with these guys. They'll probably lowball them a little bit, and the players will get upset. There'll be some beef, right? There'll be some spice for us to talk about in training camp, and ultimately they'll go from there. But I think it's pretty safe to say that these guys can be a part of the solution long term. And I think you're in a spot where you can afford to, give a second contract to those type of players, right? Considering that you're not paying anybody at this point on your defense beyond Boye Mafe. So you have some space to do it. You don't want to get in the habit of letting good players walk. They appear to be guys that you actually drafted that are good players, which is somewhat rare for this team. Reward them. Have them be a part of the future. I think you would like to see more from a leadership perspective from both those guys. I don't think either one are really, vocal leaders. I think this team could use that. I think they're going to get a little bit of that with Jonathan Allen coming in free agency, and BJ's certainly done a nice job of that, but you still are looking for that alpha on defense. I don't know if that can be DJ Turner or Dax Hill, but my takeaway is, get these guys extended. I think they deserve it. Don't break the market. The question becomes, what order do you want to do this, and what's your priority list? Where do you put Chase Brown on that list? Where's Dax? Where's DJ? At the end of the day, now his free agency has come and gone. I don't think it needs to be Dax first, but it'd be very interesting to see if they kind of took the Chase and Higgins approach. I do think they have the same agent, Dax and DJ. Don't quote me on that. I'm not positive, but I could see a world where they kind of do them both together, right? They're friends, Michigan teammates, same agent. Kind of a joint process like we saw with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. But we'll see. I'm of the mind that they should extend them both. And, if you're asking me them or Chase Brown, I don't know. But something tells me that if you don't give Chase Brown an extension, he's going to ball out again, and then you're not going to be able to afford him. But at that position, you got to make tough decisions, right? It's running back. We all like Chase Brown. He plays hard, 100% at all times, good player, available, durable. But can that be a plug-and-play spot for you in the Cincinnati Bengals offense with Zach Taylor, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow? Maybe it can be. I don't know. That's for them to decide, not us. But Conway of the Inquirer has come out and said the Bengals are interested in it. We'll see how much drama unfolds as the summer gets here and gets closer, and ultimately we'll see if they can get something done. Let's see here. Field Yates put together another mock draft after this round of NFL free agency. Did think it was interesting. Field Yates is great at his job at ESPN's been at it for a while. Always look at him as one of these top draft analysts, certainly. He's got Mendoza 1 to Vegas. We'll talk about Ty Simpson here in a second. He's got David Bailey 2 to the Jets. To me, it's Arvell Reese at 2, but, there is some debate a little bit as it relates to that now. He's got Arvell Reese at 3, Sonny Styles 4 to the Titans, Caleb Downs 5 to the Giants, Carnell Tate 6 to the Browns, Jeremiah Love 7 to the Commanders, Reuben Bain 8 to the Saints, Jordan Tyson, the receiver out of Arizona State, 9 to the Chiefs, and Mansour Delane, the cornerback out of LSU, 10 to the Bengals, which, by the way, that is 1, 2, 3, 4 Buckeyes in a row that he has from 2 to 6. So that is quite the run for Ohio State. You would think they won a postseason game this past year. Didn't happen. But Mansour Delane had his pro day yesterday at LSU and really impressed. Some of the testing numbers were really impressive. Thought he was moving around really, really well. To me, he's clearly the top corner. Again, nothing against Jermon McCoy, the kid from Tennessee, but if you're splitting hairs here and one guy missed the entirety of last year as he tore his ACL and the other guy had the best year of his college career, I'm going to take the latter, right? And I think corner is a sneaky need, even though we just talked about extending those two guys. You can never have too much depth at corner. Zach has said that a million times. They still don't know who that fourth corner is going to be, and JD got his extension, but do you really want him to be the starting nickel? Probably not. If you take a guy like Delane, are you asking Dax to switch positions again and have him go back to the nickel, even though he just had the best year of his career on the outside? Do you switch Delane to the nickel, even though he was outside throughout the entirety of his career? I don't know. I think it would make a lot of us sick if they took a guy at 10 overall that was on defense and he wasn't able to be in the starting lineup. Again, injuries are going to happen, especially at that position, so you need the depth. But what's that going to look like if you take Delane at number 10? I'm opening up the mind to it. Again, we've been saying this for several weeks. I would encourage you all to do it as well. The Bengals love drafting corners early. The two guys we were just talking about, where we questioned, whether or not they were good picks, certainly initially, and now we look at it here in 26 and say they were good picks, right? They weren't smash hits necessarily, but they were second contract guys. It took them a little bit longer to get going. Obviously, you drafted Dax initially as a safety, but they love taking corners early, and this is kind of that nightmare situation that we've been talking about a lot. And ultimately, if this unfolds, I think you're in a situation, if you're Cincinnati, where you got to take one of the corners, but Dylan Thieneman, the safety out of Oregon, is kind of a sleeper pick potentially. Is it a bit of a reach at number 10? Perhaps. We talk about best player available all the time, but guess what? The Bengals can't put themselves in a position where they can do that because they have so many needs on this team. Like, for instance, they have to take a linebacker in the first 3 rounds, right? And that's not going to be necessarily BPA philosophy, right? But they pigeonholed themselves into this situation because they didn't address it in free agency, and it was something that went neglected, right? They've done this for multiple years in a row. But, like, all those edge rushers just gone. Bailey gone, Reese gone, Styles gone, Downs gone. And then you're sitting there as pick 6, and you're like, my goodness, what are you going to do? And then ultimately Bain goes 8 to the Saints. And then, like I said, I think if you find yourself in this situation where all those edge rushers are gone and Caleb Downs is gone as well and Sonny Styles is gone as well, you're probably picking a corner or thinking about reaching on a guy like Dylan Thieneman, which I'm not entirely opposed to, but corner makes a lot of sense there if you're the Bengals. And neither one of those tackles going is tough. You hope that somebody like Cleveland, who desperately needs a tackle, rolls the dice on either Maui Noah or Fano. I don't think Ty Simpson's going in the top 10. He's going to go in the first round, but he's not going in the top 10. So, the 2 wide receivers is a bit of a break. Can you get Mekhi Lemon to go potentially before you as well? I'm not quite sure. But if you're sitting there at pick number 10 and neither one of those tackles have gone, chances are you're going to be in a situation where you got to take one of the corners, whether it be Delane or McCoy, or you got to reach on Dylan Thieneman at that safety spot out of Oregon. Only time will tell. 41, he's got Anthony Hill, the linebacker out of Texas. Again, what did I just say? You're not in a position where you can go BPA. You're not in a position where you can go best player available. You need to take a linebacker relatively early. And if you miss on Styles in the first round, that means it's got to be in the second or third round. Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic, when he did his post-free agency mock draft, he had Anthony Hill selected by Cincinnati at 41 overall. I don't hate it. Other guys that were still on the board here for Field Yates, Caleb Banks, the interior defensive tackle from Florida who just had that injury setback, Christian Miller, the DT from Georgia, TJ Parker, edge from Clemson, Gabe Akis, a guy I've talked about a lot, edge from Illinois, Lee Hunter, interior guy from Texas Tech, and Jacob Rodriguez, also available here at the spot. He had Rodriguez going later in the second round. So if you're taking a linebacker and J-Rod's available and you go in a different direction with Anthony Hill, is that a mistake? Potentially. I'm not going to sit here on March 24th and get all worked up about a second-round pick in a mock draft. But I can sit here and say that you're in a position where you're kind of forced to take a linebacker early, right? And you saw how the rookie linebacker experiment went last year with Demetrius Knight and, of course, Barrett Carter, and it did not go well. In fact, it did not go well at all. Of note, Jake Golday went 40 in this mock to the Chiefs. 1 pick before Cincinnati in the second round. Linebacker out of UC, Zach Taylor, was up close and personal with all those UC prospects at their pro day yesterday. Keegan Nixon got some great content there for Bearcat Journal. It's on his Twitter as well if you want to check any of that out. But, one of the receivers for Cincinnati as the day 3 pick, I'm sure is something they would entertain. Are they interested in Corleone? Where's he going to go? Obviously, you need some DT depth. Is he going to get overdrafted because of his size? Not sure. And is Golday available for you at 41? And is that someone you take? Right, that feels like a Bengal pick. Right, if Jake Golday is available at 41 out of UC and you're going linebacker, kind of feels like they would go in that direction over a guy like Anthony Hill or even a guy like Jacob Rodriguez. Just kind of feels like the Bengal thing to do. But I'd be surprised if they didn't take a Bearcat at some point. They'll certainly sign one as a UDFA. We've seen them take that route previously, but I think Zach Taylor and Al Golden would love to have Jake Golday on their roster. But in this latest mock, he goes a little bit early. But there you have it. Apparently the Bengals are interested and having some conversations with DJ Turner and Dax Hill and want to extend both of those guys. We will see if it comes drama-free or not. My guess would be not. All right, C. Trent Rosecrans. He went through some bold predictions for the Cincinnati Reds. Opening day is on Thursday. Again, if you're just joining us, we will have our show on Thursday, and that will lead into something that Nick Kirby and Trace Fowler do as well. First pitch is at 4. Maybe it's 4:10. Andrew Abbott gets the ball. Quickly, some injury news, some positive injury news on Brady Singer. Apparently the blister is not going to be an issue for him. He's going to get the ball. no issues, no problem. Still waiting on an update from Dolo. Obviously, Green is out for the first half of the year. So the depth being tested early. You're going to have to lean on the youngsters if you're Tito, and you're going to have to keep your fingers crossed that those guys can stay healthy, at least certainly throughout the first half of the year before you hope to get Hunter Green back. And speaking of Hunter Green, that was the first bold prediction here from C. Trent. He believes that Hunter Green is going to lead a playoff run. C. Trent made it very clear he expects this team to make the playoffs once again, and he doesn't expect it to be as short-lived as it was last year, ultimately in Los Angeles, when you get swept by the Dodgers and ultimately don't win a game in that series. And for what it's worth, I completely agree with him, and that should be the expectation, right? I think the front office did a really nice job. We can bemoan all we want about the lack of resources and the lack of aggression, but considering it is the Cincinnati Reds that we are talking about, I would grade them as doing pretty darn well. This offseason certainly was not trending in that direction until they landed Eugenio Suarez on that one-year deal, and hopefully he can produce a lot of home runs for you. But that is the expectation, right? Can you win the Central? We'll see. But this is a complete and utter failure if you can't make it to the postseason. And you made it to the postseason last year, so that should mean your expectation is to be able to advance in the postseason this go-around. And obviously it's going to be a heck of a lot easier if you don't have to play, an elite seed, obviously, in the National League. And if you can avoid certainly the wild card round, that makes it a heck of a lot easier as well. But that's the expectation for this team. Now, is Hunter Green going to be able to lead them to a playoff run? I have my doubts on whether or not that is possible. I still have my doubts on whether or not we will see Hunter Green this year. And maybe I'm being overly pessimistic there, but at the same time, we had the procedure for the bone spurs. Is he going to come back? Is he going to be 100%? The no UCL issue is promising, but a guy that throws that hard and it's coming off of surgery, there's no reason to think that he potentially couldn't have another one, right? I mean, Paul Skeens is kind of defying pitching right now, and when you throw that hard, you're going to have some arm issues. And Hunter Green obviously has had his fair share throughout his career here in Cincinnati. So even if he comes back for the second half, is he going to be able to go throughout the entirety of the second half and pitch at his best in the postseason? I'm not sure. Got the one postseason start against the Dodgers last year, and that went just about as bad as it could have. So, I think if this team is going to get to the promised land, I don't mean necessarily the World Series, but in a spot where they're winning some playoff games and potentially advancing in the postseason, obviously they're going to ride on their starting pitching. But I don't know if Hunter Green's going to be capable of kind of carrying the torch, carrying the flag, and leading them as it relates to that. I think you're going to need to see a lot of Elly De La Cruz. I think you're going to need to see a lot of Matty McClain. I think you're going to need to see a lot of quality starts from all those guys in the rotation in order for that to ultimately come true. C. Trent also has Elly winning the MVP. I can get on board with this a little bit. For whatever reason, I don't understand it for the life of me, and we've said this for years. Elly, of course, has made his fair share of errors at shortstop. And there's also the take out there that he doesn't have the clutch gene. And, throughout his career to this point, when he's up late game, bases loaded, opportunity, tie, take the lead, or cut into a lead, it doesn't always go well. That's fair. The stats will tell you that. But this is Elly's best opportunity to really show what he is capable of doing. Number one, he's healthy, right? Had the quad issue throughout the entirety of the second half of last year. Very fair to say that obviously hampered him from a speed perspective and a power perspective as well. And Matt McClain's getting a lot of people excited because if Matt McClain can just do a little bit of what he's doing in spring training, he's not going to bat 500 this year for the Redlegs, but if he can just do a little bit of what he's doing in spring training, that offers a heck of a lot of protection in the lineup for Elly. And that's part of the reason why we haven't seen him kind of cash in on what his ceiling really is, because his lineup around him, he's not protected at all. Right? And you can just get away with throwing him hooks, and you don't have to give him a flat one, and it'll chase, right? And you run into some issues, and you, of course, run into a lot of strikeouts if you're Elly. Well, if Matty McClain's hitting the baseball, and you got a guy in Eugenio Suarez behind him who's also a threat to hit it out of the ballpark, might have to pitch to Elly a little bit more, which could allow him to see some more fastballs, allow him to see some more strikes, period, and potentially do more damage. So I don't hate that. He's got all the tools for an MVP guy. He's got the flash. He's got the speed. He's got the athleticism. He's got the web gem making plays, right? That's the thing with Ellie. He makes all the great plays, struggles with the routine plays at times, right? Has the power, right? Has the swag. I mean, he's got it. So I don't necessarily hate this at all. I don't know what the odds are off the top of my head, but I would imagine that there's some good value in Ellie perhaps winning the MVP in the National League. And lastly, from C. Trent, he predicts that they will add a big name at the deadline. He brought up when they added Jonathan Broxton, the late GM, Jocketty, rest in peace, made that acquisition when they already had Aroldis Chapman in the bullpen. I think that is one of the most under-discussed things about this Reds team was how well the front office did at the deadline last year. The front office, their moves at the deadline ultimately is what propelled them into the postseason. Getting a guy like Zach Littell, right? Miguel Andujar, was really big for them. Obviously they only really threw him or batted him against lefties, but I thought his production was really sky high, and I thought those moves that Nick Krall, Brad Metter, and company made at the deadline are ultimately what got the Reds over the top end of the postseason, obviously coupled with the collapse of the New York Mets. But they got to get out to a fast start. Right? How many times has this team come in with expectations and they struggle in April, and we're sitting there and you're already behind in the division, and it's just like you're always trying to close the gap throughout the whole season. It's kind of a very tiresome place to be as a fan, where you get off to a slow start and you're always just trying to climb yourself out of the hole. What if they're in a position where they actually get out to a fine start, right, and they're actually hanging in there with teams like the Brewers and the Cubs for the Central, and then you're looking around at the deadline like, right, maybe it be a starter that you add, maybe it be a bullpen guy, maybe it be a left-handed bat, maybe it be somebody that you add at the deadline. So with the moves that Cincinnati made last year, that will tell you that they're fine adding at the deadline. Now, are they going to add a huge name? That, of course, wouldn't really be a Cincinnati Reds thing to do. But at the end of the day, I don't really hate that prediction from C. Trent, right? So I think if they're in a position where they win some games and they're showing some of that potential and some of those expectations that we all have, I could see Brad Metter and Nick Krall making a borderline splashy move at the deadline, ultimately at the end of the day. All right, Ty Simpson. Dan Orlovsky went on ESPN yesterday, and he said that he thinks that Ty Simpson is quarterback one in this class. And there's a lot of people that go up on TV these days and spew a bunch of nonsense. Dan Orlovsky's not one of those guys at all. Dan Orlovsky is incredible at his job, and when he listens when he's talking about football, I listen. Right? I've been on Ty Simpson. I've been on this wave since he took that first snap against Florida State, a game in which Kalen DeBoer and company were embarrassed. Right? The guy clearly has a knack for playing the position. He clearly has some tools. He clearly has some athleticism. He's clearly got some arm strength, and his dad's a coach, right? Not to say that all coaches' kids work out, but at the quarterback position, when you have a lot of traits, that certainly is an advantage. I watched just about every snap he took at the University of Alabama, and it was clear to me that he's an NFL-type prospect. Fernando Mendoza had an unbelievable year. Do not want to take anything away from Mendoza. I think, if you're asking me, I'm not agreeing with Orlovsky. I don't think he's a better prospect than Mendoza, but I do think he's a lock to go in the first round. Mendoza wasn't asked to do a ton. Now, when he had to be great, he was, right? That second half against Penn State, it was on his shoulders, right? The national championship against Miami, there were some huge throws that he made in that game. Huge throws, right? Some throws he had to make against Ohio State and Indianapolis in the Big Ten championship game. So the notion of, Ty had to just do way more than Mendoza. Mendoza didn't have to do much. That's fair, but you're a quarterback. At some point throughout a year, especially when you win a national championship, you're going to be asked to do special things. And there were plenty of times when Mendoza was asked to do special things, and he was special. Now, with Ty Simpson, I think there's a narrative like, oh, he was at Alabama and they got to the playoff or whatever, like, fine. Well, this isn't the same old Alabama. This isn't Nick Saban's Alabama, right? And they could say the standard is the standard all they want. Well, guess what? It ain't, because it doesn't even resemble the standard. And I don't mean to take a shot at Kalen DeBoer there. That's just the reality of the situation. So he didn't just take Alabama to the college football playoff. That Alabama team had no business being in the college football playoff. That Alabama team had no business going into Athens and beating Georgia. Right? Obviously, things did not go well in the conference championship game, but a lot of those wins, especially throughout the middle chunk of the year where they were just going through a gauntlet and playing on the road, right? Ty Simpson was unbelievable in that game, and Bama had no business winning several of those games, and he was able to elevate them and make the plays necessary down the stretch. And he got sick at the end of the year, lost a lot of weight, and was hurt. Nobody got hit more last year than Ty Simpson either. And then his play struggled, certainly down the stretch. He did not play his best against Georgia, certainly did not play his best before ultimately he had to leave with an injury in the Rose Bowl game, and rough first half against Oklahoma, but one of the best second halves of all time. But I just think he is a little bit more ready to go from an NFL standpoint just because his play was so full at Alabama. Now, Mendoza is going to do all the prep work. He's going to be prepared. He's going to be ready to go. Again, I think Mendoza is going to have success, and if I'm Vegas, I take Mendoza, and I don't think about it. But there are some teams out there that need a quarterback, right, but are sitting there going, well, Mendoza's the only guy. Well, there's teams that are desperate, and I don't think selecting Ty Simpson in the first 25 picks is a desperate thing at all. Top 10, can't do that. That's a bit extreme. But taking him in the top 20, top 25, I think there's a team out there that should do that, right? Because he's got the arm strength, he's got the mobility, he's got the accuracy, he knows how to play well when he's getting drilled, right? Because he got drilled all year last year. The son of a coach, right mindset. I think he checks off a ton of boxes, and it just makes me scratch my head as to why he doesn't get more love as a prospect. And it's good to hear Dan Orlovsky come out and certainly back him up. Again, I think he went a little too far saying that he's prospect 1 over Mendoza. I think it's a bit aggressive, but he's definitely a first-round pick, and he's definitely a top 20, top 25 pick, ultimately, in my opinion. All right, before we get out of here, some Sweet 16 conversation. These games start on Thursday, and my goodness, these games are absolutely unbelievable, specifically the Friday games. But, again, everyone's complaining, oh, the NIL, they're taking away Cinderellas. There's a couple of takes I have on that. Number one, we still got a couple of upsets, right? And, Cinderella's going to the Final Four in the Elite Eight. Like, that really doesn't happen a ton, right? And like Butler was a big Cinderella. Well, they're in the Big East now. So it's like they're not really, that kind of team anymore. And some of these other teams that have been Cinderellas in the past are just going to bigger, more competitive conferences. So it makes that a little bit difficult. Obviously, the NIL and the portal is changing this a little bit, and you're getting some more top-heavy teams. But at the end of the day, I think that's fine for college basketball. Now, it's not great for, the mid-major schools, and it'll be fascinating to see what Miami does and how they hold on to their roster. Word on the street is Steele's coming back. That hasn't been official yet, but we'll see. But like some of these matchups that are out there, I mean, Texas-Purdue's the worst one, and Sean Miller's got those boys playing. Iowa-Nebraska is a 4-9 game, but that is a huge rivalry with two fan bases that are insane. Nebraska just broke the, whatever you call it, the measure of the sound. They always talk about it at Arrowhead. They just broke the record for that in the tournament. These fan bases are huge, and they're crazy. And, oh, by the way, that is a rivalry, Iowa-Nebraska, and it's a 1.5-point spread in the Sweet 16 on a Thursday night at 7:30. That's going to be unbelievable. Arkansas's got to play the best team in the tournament in Arizona. But he's got one of the best players in the tournament, maybe the best player in the tournament, which is what I said. Darius Acuff Jr. struggles a little bit defensively, but as far as an offensive player, absolute box office guy. They've got another freshman. They've got some bigs that have played in the tournament. That game's going to be incredible. How about Illinois-Houston at 10 o'clock at night? Holy cow, that is unbelievable. 3 versus 2. And then you look at Friday, St. John's Duke. Absolutely, Duke is on upset alert. Rick Pitino's in his 70s and continues to just coach at an extremely high level. I've been so impressed with what he's been able to do. We talked about this earlier in the week. When you get a guy like Bill Belichick, right, where it's like he's just he's lost his fastball, right? Pete Carroll, who I like a lot, he's lost his fastball, right? Patino still got it. And the intensity that he showed there, stone cold after he got, Bill Self fouled like 3 times, right? And then there was like 3 seconds left, and he's like, let me just clear out the lane and get it to my point guard and have him take it to the rack. And that's exactly what he did. Big win for St. John's. I think they got a lot of life in that game. Bama, Michigan, not a great matchup at all for Bama. But I felt like Michigan is the most vulnerable 1 seed. Obviously, that's not true as Florida lost, but I do think there's some vulnerability there. That's a huge number. I don't really understand that. Michigan State, UConn, my goodness. Izzo, Hurley. Like, look at some of the coaches in these games. Patino, Shire, Oates, Dusty May, Tom Izzo. Dan Hurley, Barnes has an opportunity to put some of the criticism that he's gotten aside a little bit if they can pull off an upset against Iowa State. So I get the people that, fill out a bracket and they pick a bunch of upsets and it doesn't happen, so they complain about it, right? Is it fun to get all chalky when you're filling out a bracket? No. Right, but I think these past couple of years are proof that things are changing a little bit in college basketball. That's not a problem. You might think it's a problem now, but tap in on Thursday and Friday night. You'll be like, you know what? Actually, I think we're okay with this. And guess what? The Elite Eight's going to be just as good, and so is the Final Four, and hopefully, ultimately, the national title is as well. But some of these games are incredible. We will see if we can get our guy Paul Fritchner on to talk a little bit about the Calhoun hire, and, of course, maybe some of these Sweet 16 games later in the week. All right, before we get out of here, I do want to mention you can go over to Homage. I've been saying homage all week, but I guess the H is silent, so apologies there on that front. But Chatterbox Sports is proud to partner with Homage, and we've got a special deal for you. The first 100 listeners get 20% off site-wide. That includes all the great T-shirts, sweatshirts, and everyday gear you see. Just note, a few exclusions do apply, like some of the starter jackets and some of the New Heights gear as well. We've got a bunch of stuff. They got some cool Reds collection stuff. You can order it now. See if you can't get it for opening day, but certainly this weekend at some point. Got some Miami stuff. If you're a UC alum, you're fired up about the Calhoun hire. Get some Bearcat gear as well. But here's the key. You got to go to homage.com/cbox. That is very, very important. Homage.com/cbox to get your 20% off. Use promo code chatter at checkout. Homage.com/cbox. CHATTER is the code. Homage.com/cbox. Also, Chatterbox Sports has teamed up with Ultifiber to give away 2 tickets to the college basketball championship game on April 6th in Indianapolis. Want to experience the biggest game in college basketball in person? Complete the entry form in the episode notes below. It is in the YouTube description. If you're listening to the podcast, it will be in the notes of the podcast as well. That's all you got to do. One lucky winner will score 2 tickets to the championship game in Indianapolis. Appreciate everybody being here on a Tuesday. We will be back tomorrow. More Reds conversation. I have my predictions for the Reds year, a little season preview, opening day preview, and we'll see if we get any more Bengals news to talk about there as well. And we'll see if we can't get something official on Travis Steele coming back to Oxford next year. But appreciate everyone as always. Until tomorrow, take care, everybody.